So you're gonna build window casings out of this? Oh, he's like all the way in the kitchen. Can't hear me. So you're gonna build window casings out of this, even though you...
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the door jamb extension will be difficult to do.
Yeah.
Still right now, so. And this should be the size of material I need for the window casings.
Okay.
Maybe.
What?
It's not big enough. It's not big enough. That's 8 1/4. And these are 5 1/2. From that wall, and this wall's 6 1/2. The materials to build window casings. I thought that was going to be the ones, but I forgot I bought them for the door jams.
Well, do the door jams then, right? Use them up, use up the material.
I can.
Oh, because you have to go outside?
Yeah.
And we don't have any...
This is a wall of snow still. This is a short wall of snow.
So change of plans.
Well, small change plans.
Still needs to get done.
Yeah, we still have plenty that we can do.
Are you able to put trim around that window then?
Here,
Yeah.
Sean will do trim around the joint and around the interior doors and window. And then wait on the others.
Okay.
These are 5 1/2 inch. I need 6 1/2 inch for the back window and 8 1/4 for the side windows. So rather than doing that today, I'm going to instead install the door trim on the interior of these doors. It's 3 1/2 inch Craftsman. I know it's base, but I don't really care. It's just a good flat square trim. I don't want big grooves and profiles and things that are going to collect dust and dirt and be difficult to clean. You know, periodically, once a year, even spring cleaning once a year or something, to have a bucket of just cleaning solution and a rag and be able to wipe up and down around the trim real fast and just wipe it down, get all the soot off, anything like that, and dirt. Makes it so much easier if it's just a flat, smooth trim. So that's why we're doing trim. It all comes 12 foot long because it's baseboard. That's what we're also going to use right here on this transition between the plywood and the drywall. I think it'll look good. We'll have that as all white trim and white trim around the doors. And then these hardware boards around the garage door are exposed grain, and we're going to probably stain those. It's a little bit of a contrast, and we're going to stain the stairs, we've decided. So we'll stain all that as a contrast. I'm going to go ahead and get started cutting these baseboards. I'm going to put that around this window, probably start there, and then on the doors. Once I'm done with that stuff, then I'll move on to starting around the plywood and drywall transition.
Before I could really get started installing the trim, I needed to take a minute and make sure to square up the fence on my chop saw. It's something that you typically need to check periodically, and I haven't done it for several years. As I install the trim around the windows and doors inside the shop, I'm just going to keep it pretty simple, and it's just going to be a 45-degree miter cut. So I want to take time and make sure that my saw is set up right and the fence is still accurate at 45 degrees. The problem that you have if you don't check that, by the time you do 2 cuts and mate them together, if you're off by 1 degree, suddenly that cut becomes 2 degrees of gap. And as you can see here, my saw is off just a little bit. I'm estimating that it's about a degree and a half maybe. So I'm going to take a minute, loosen everything up, and readjust that fence to make sure that it's as close as I can get it to being right on. Over the last few years, anytime I've been doing trim, it's been mostly in the, I believe it's called craftsman style. So I've got a thicker header across the top of the window, the two side plate trims, and then the window seal sticks out from the wall surface and protrudes out a little bit with another runner underneath the window seal. And in that style, all of the cuts are really 90-degree cuts. When I'm making repeated 90-degree cuts like that, I just use my speed square and mark the 90 degrees so that I have a full line to cut anyway. And it's real easy to account for about a degree off with your fence when you're doing a 90-degree cut, if you've got a full line. It gets a little bit more complicated if you try to compensate on a 45-degree cut, because it's real easy to shuffle just a little bit this way or a little bit that way, and then you're no longer at 45. And since this project's going to be all 45-degree cuts around the square, I figured it was definitely worth it to take the time to adjust the saw and make sure that it's accurate. And as you can see here, that couple of degrees makes a huge difference. Now the saw runs true to the square. The only other step I wanted to do is take a straight edge and put it against the fence to make sure that the fence still holds true to straight, and then turn the table, set it at 90 degrees, and verify my 90 degrees. It's highly unlikely, but I suppose it would be possible to have it be in alignment for the 45-degree angle on one side, but be off on the 90-degree angle. So I just thought it'd be a good idea to check it before I moved on. Once I knew that everything was adjusted and accurate, it was fine to go ahead and get started actually installing the trim. But I ran into one other thing.
You can see how on these corners the vinyl is like where they weld it. It sticks out past on both edges. And that means when I put my trim up here, it's going to have a pretty good gap. And so that's also going to throw off my measurement. Because I have to do a 45-degree bevel on these, I need it pretty tight so it fits good and sits nicely. And I could measure it from here and have the little gap here on the inside edge and have my 45 come out. But if this is holding it out and this one isn't, then I'm no longer parallel to the window and I'm no longer going to be in a 45 degree. I'm going to need 44.5 or 44 degrees in order to keep a tight joint here. So I'm just doing anything I can to be more successful at having a tight joint. So I'm going to trim this square on each side on all of them and just make sure they're square so it'll sit in there nicely.
Since we haven't gotten our battery room completed yet and haven't transferred all of our power systems into that room, I'm having to use the generator up here to run my chop saw. This is precisely the situation that caused me to lean towards this generator when I bought it. It's a dual fuel generator, meaning that it can run on gasoline or propane. So right now, I'm running it on the propane, and I don't have to worry so much about having all the doors and windows open to keep it ventilated, or have it parked outside and run extension cords in to power the tools. So I start it up and make my cuts and charge my air compressor while I'm at it. Since I'm having to start and stop the generator every time I need to make the cuts, I try to take a minute to lay out and mark things off and measure several cuts at a time so that I can go to the saw, make those several cuts, and then shut down the generator to install them. I'm just trying to be a little bit more efficient with it that way rather than starting and stopping the generator all the time. Some of these trim pieces are not going to have just a simple 45-degree angle, and some of them are going to have a more compounded angle, like this piece that goes across the top of the door. So in situations like that, I find it easier to install one or two of the pieces, then I can measure that angle more accurately and have a nice tight fit. We've got a laminated flooring that we're going to install in the battery room, and because that'll be an interior door, that flooring will continue out on top of this landing. So this trim piece along the edge of the landing stands about 1/2 inch taller than the subflooring. That's to give it a nice finished edge for that laminate. The transition trim between the drywall and the plywood is going to be a running trim, where the overall run is much longer than just the individual boards.
I usually do a bevel cut at that butt joint. It just hides better. So I'll run the trim and I'll do a beveled angle on the end of it, and I'll start the next board with the same bevel matched angle and let it run over. And that way then it overlaps and lays down and you don't have a hard gap. If there's any kind of like shrinkage or expansion in the trim, usually it's a minimal amount, but a 1/16 of an inch expansion on a 12-foot length of trim, and you do that twice, you can end up with an 1/8 inch gap pretty easily. So rather than having that, if it's got a bevel cut, that can push and pull a 1/16 of an inch and you're not going to see it because it's laid over. The other thing I'll do with that is I'll match the angles to the hidden direction. What that means is, like, you're going to enter the shop this way. So you're going to be looking at these sidewall trims, that direction, this direction. So when I do the bevel cut, I'll bevel it and taper it in this way so that as I'm looking at it, I'm not explaining this well, but I'll show it well. I don't want to be standing here and look up at a joint there and be in line with the angle of the cut. That's going to keep it, make it more visible for me. So if I have the angle cut this way, as I'm standing here looking at it, I'll see the overlap of the cuts and it won't stand out.
Well, look at that. How do you feel about that?
It's just what I pictured.
That looks dang good.
Yeah.
Just get a good sanding in the next few days. And I think we have some finished walls ready to go. You need to caulk it, right? That's the other
Yeah,
thing.
just a light sanding, and then I'll caulk all of these joints, and we'll hit painter's caulk on all of these seams between the plywood. Because where the plywood seam is, there's still gonna, just inherently, there's gonna be some flexibility. So we'll hit that with painter's caulk and that'll stay flexible.
Okay.
It should keep it from cracking.
Holy cow, that looks so good.
So earlier I was talking about the bevels on the ends. And I cut them at a 45 on the ends. So when you look down it this way, you can't see where those seams are. And when they're caulked and painted, they're going to disappear. If you look back this way, you have an opportunity to see where that seam is. It doesn't really show up too much, and it'll go away when it caulks and paints. But most of your view to seeing any of that trim is going to be from this direction. So when you look at it this way, it's overlapped to the side of you, so you can't see that joint. It just disappears. You're not looking down into the joint, you're looking across the joint. I'm really, really happy with the way that the trim turned out around the compressor room.
Yeah, I feel really good. Today has been a very, very busy, productive day, and I think we are in really good shape from here on out. I feel like today was like catch up from everything that's been going on, the snowstorms, the vacation, all of that, everything. So I feel like we're finally at a spot where we should be with this project.
Yep.